Gene Hackman proved you don't need easy charm to own every room you walk into. You need truth. Richard Lewis spent decades making neurosis look like an art form. Comedy, he showed us, can be painfully honest. Paul Rubens built an entire world out of a single character and refused to let Hollywood define him beyond it. Maggie Smith, decades of work, zero wasted moments, precision disguised as effortlessness. David McCallum crossed from spy icon to beloved television fixture across 6 decades. Proof that reinvention is always available. James Earl Jones. A voice, a presence, a gravity that could silence a room or shake it to its foundation. Some people are simply irreplaceable. There is a scene in Steven Soderbergh's Ocean's 11 where George Clooney, playing Danny Ocean, walks out of a New Jersey prison in a tuxedo, squints at the sunlight, and within 30 seconds looks more comfortable than most men do in their own living rooms. It is a small moment, but it tells you everything. The ease is real. The control is real. And the decision to make that film, after a string of career miscalculations that had genuinely damaged his standing, was one of the shrewdest reinventions in modern Hollywood history. That film came out in 2001. By then, Clooney had already been famous for 7 years, and famous in the particular way that can quietly destroy a person. He had been the smiling face on 1 billion magazine covers, the undisputed star of one of the most watched television dramas in the world. And then, almost immediately, the cautionary tale that people in the industry whispered about at parties. How do you go from that to Ocean's 11? How do you go from Batman and Robin to the Coen brothers? The answer involves choices, very deliberate, sometimes stubborn, occasionally counterintuitive choices. And it tells you more about George Clooney than any profile ever written about him. He was born on May 6, 1961, in Lexington, Kentucky, the son of Nick Clooney, a television journalist and host who had his own modest regional fame, and Nina Bruce Warren, a beauty queen and civic figure. Growing up in Augusta, Kentucky, young George absorbed the mechanics of performance almost by osmosis. His father was on television. His aunt, Rosemary Clooney, was a bona fide star, a singer and actress who had shared the screen with Bing Crosby and sold millions of records in the 1950s. The family understood show business not as a distant fantasy, but as an actual profession with actual rules and actual failure built into it. That understanding of failure would matter. George Clooney spent the better part of a decade failing, at least by Hollywood's accounting. He moved to Los Angeles in 1982 with a used car he drove cross-country and a connection to his cousin Miguel Ferrer, who helped him get started. He auditioned relentlessly. He got bits. He got recurring roles on shows that didn't last. He was on The Facts of Life for 2 seasons in the mid-1980s, playing a handyman at a girls' school, a role remembered by almost no one. He was on Roseanne for a few episodes. He drove a door-to-door sales truck, sold insurance, cut tobacco, and did whatever work was available. He was, for most of the decade, a working actor in the most unglamorous sense of that phrase. What he was developing in those years, without quite knowing it, was patience and a very precise sense of what kind of actor he wanted to be. He watched stars who burned quickly. He watched character actors who lasted. He studied Cary Grant, the effortlessness, the timing, the way a man could fill a room by seeming not to try. He was absorbing a philosophy of screen presence that would eventually make him one of the few people of his generation capable of carrying an old-fashioned movie star role without irony. The break came in September 1994, when ER premiered on NBC. Clooney was 33 years old, considered late in television terms for a genuine launch. He played Dr. Doug Ross, a pediatric emergency physician with a drinking problem, a weakness for women, and a complicated moral center. The role was designed to be charming and flawed, and Clooney was both. But what separated his performance from simply being likable was the specificity he brought to Ross's contradictions. This was not a handsome doctor doing handsome doctor things. There was weight to it. The show became appointment television for 60 million people at its peak. Clooney became, overnight, one of the most recognized faces in America. And then came the temptation. Hollywood, sensing a star, offered him everything at once. He took some of it. He made From Dusk Till Dawn in 1996, which was strange and violent and interesting, and worked with Quentin Tarantino, and that was a smart call. He made One Fine Day with Michelle Pfeiffer in 1996, which was pleasant and forgettable. He made The Peacemaker in 1997, a workmanlike thriller that earned modest returns. And then, in the summer of 1997, wearing rubber nipples on a batsuit that would become the most mocked costume in blockbuster history, he appeared in Batman and Robin. The film was a disaster by every measure. Critics dismantled it. Audiences stayed home. The franchise was effectively killed for 8 years. Clooney, to his lasting credit, never deflected blame. He has said repeatedly in interviews across many years that he felt personally responsible, that he believed his performance was part of what went wrong, and that he is sorry. That honesty, that willingness to absorb a failure rather than explain it away, became a kind of cornerstone of his public identity. He was a movie star who admitted mistakes. In an industry built on image management, that was genuinely unusual. He followed Batman and Robin with Out of Sight in 1998, directed by Steven Soderbergh. This is the film that, in retrospect, reset everything. Clooney played Jack Foley, a charismatic bank robber who falls in something close to love with a federal marshal, played by Jennifer Lopez. The chemistry was electric. The film was cool and propulsive, and Clooney was, for the first time on a cinema screen, fully himself. The television charm was there, but so was something richer. Intelligence, physicality, a willingness to be complicated. The film was not a massive commercial success, but it told a very specific audience, filmmakers, critics, the people who greenlight things, that Clooney could carry a feature film in a way that Batman and Robin had temporarily obscured. Three Kings came in 1999, directed by David O. Russell, and pushed further. Clooney played a Special Forces major in the Gulf War, caught between cynicism, greed, and conscience. The film was angry and strange and formally ambitious. It was exactly the kind of project a calculated star would have avoided, and exactly the kind Clooney was drawn to. His friendship and later friction with Russell on set became something of a legend. They clashed badly, and the shoot was tense, but the film was undeniably alive. Then came Ocean's 11 in 2001, and everything shifted. The film was a remake of a 1960 Rat Pack vehicle, and the comparison was deliberately invited. Clooney's Danny Ocean wasn't trying to be Frank Sinatra, but the movie understood that audiences would see the echo and enjoy it. Here was a man built for that kind of movie, relaxed, precise, funny without working at it. The film made nearly $450 million worldwide. It spawned 2 sequels. It made Clooney definitively bankable in a way no television success could guarantee. But what is interesting about the decade that followed Ocean's 11 is that Clooney did not simply cash in. He became, in the period from roughly 2003 to 2012, one of the most adventurous and politically engaged mainstream stars the industry had produced in a generation. He co-wrote and directed Confessions of a Dangerous Mind in 2002, and Good Night and Good Luck in 2005. The latter, a black-and-white period film about Edward R. Murrow confronting Senator Joseph McCarthy, and one of the most serious-minded studio films of the decade. It was nominated for 6 Academy Awards. Clooney received nominations for Best Director and Best Original Screenplay. It confirmed that his ambitions behind the camera were not vanity projects. In front of the camera, he was accumulating one of the more interesting filmographies of his era. Syriana in 2005, in which he played a CIA operative embedded in the politics of oil and geopolitics, earned him the Academy Award for Best Supporting Actor. He gained weight for the role, deliberately diminishing his physical appeal, and the gamble read as commitment rather than stunt. Michael Clayton, in 2007, earned him a Best Actor nomination, a controlled, interior performance as a law firm fixer, facing a moral reckoning that many critics consider his finest dramatic work. Up in the Air, in 2009, working with Jason Reitman, was another nomination, another sharp, economically observed performance as a man whose emotional distance is simultaneously his profession and his damage. Alongside all of this, he was becoming something else, a political figure, or at least a politically visible one. He traveled to Darfur repeatedly and used his platform to draw attention to the crisis there in a period when most celebrities treated foreign policy as a photo opportunity. He testified before Congress. He was arrested in 2012 at a protest outside the Sudanese embassy in Washington. He took these positions at real personal and professional cost. Some producers and executives do not like their stars making news for reasons outside of movies, and he largely did not seem to care. He also became, somewhat against type, a businessman of genuine substance. He co-founded Casamigos Tequila in 2013 with his friends Rand Gerber and Mike Meldman. The company was sold to Diageo in 2017 for up to $1 billion, a figure that, when reported, briefly made Clooney one of the highest-earning figures in Hollywood, not because of a film, but because of a spirits brand he had originally started for personal use. The story was so on-brand that it seemed invented. Clooney effortlessly made $1 billion from tequila. But it was real, and it underlined something that had always been true. He was better at business than the image of the charming, slightly rumpled movie star suggested. His personal life, which he had long kept at a careful distance from the tabloid cycle, changed significantly in 2014, when he married Amal Alamuddin, a British-Lebanese human rights lawyer who argued cases before the International Court of Justice and had represented Julian Assange and the Armenian genocide recognition case before the European Court of Human Rights. The marriage was significant, not simply because Clooney, who had been publicly skeptical of remarriage for years, had changed his position, but because of who he had married. Amal Clooney is, by any serious measure, a more publicly consequential figure in her own field than her husband is in his. The dynamic interested people. In 2017, they became parents to twins, Ella and Alexander. What is worth noting about Clooney's career since roughly 2015 is its selectivity and its willingness to step into genuinely difficult material. He directed and starred in The Monuments Men in 2014, imperfect, broadly reviewed, but a sincere attempt to tell an underexplored story about art and war. He directed Suburbicon in 2017, adapted from an unproduced Coen Brothers script. He starred in and directed The Midnight Sky in 2020 for Netflix, a quiet, melancholy science fiction film that found a significant audience during the pandemic, and he produced and directed The Boys in the Boat in 2023, a film about the 1936 U.S. Olympic rowing team, a return to prestige, crowd-pleasing filmmaking that earns solid reviews and respectable box office. He has remained on television in the sense that his cultural presence is consistent and his public statements carry weight. When he publicly called in 2024 for President Biden not to seek re-election, the op-ed ran in the New York Times and was discussed as one of the more consequential public interventions by a celebrity in recent political memory. Love or loathe the position, it was not the behavior of a man coasting on legacy. It was the behavior of someone who still believes his voice matters and is willing to use it at potential cost to himself. The through line across all of it, the television years, the Batman disaster, the reinvention, the awards, the tequila billions, the political engagement, the marriage, the directing, is a consistent refusal to let any single version of George Clooney become fixed and final. He was a TV heartthrob who became a serious filmmaker. He was a studio product who became a political activist. He was the confirmed bachelor who became a father of twins. He was a movie star who made $1 billion selling alcohol. None of these transformations are contradictory. They are, in fact, the portrait of a man who has spent 40 years paying extremely close attention to who he wants to be. He is now in his early 60s. His hair is fully silver and has been for decades. He went grey early and kept it, in an industry where youth is the product being sold, because he understood that his particular appeal did not depend on looking young. He still makes films, he still directs them, he still speaks, sometimes at cost, on questions he believes matter. He still moves through the world with the particular ease of a man who has survived enough failure to know that none of it is permanent, and enough success to know the same thing. That scene in the tuxedo, walking out of the prison, blinking into the light, already thinking about the next move, is not a metaphor. It is simply what he looks like. And somehow, after everything, it still fits.